Hey everyone, this is Teresa from Base 10 Montessori, and I'm coming to you from my new location in Michigan. So I've officially moved from Kentucky to Michigan, and I'd say I'm pretty well settled. I got things set up enough at least to use, which is pretty good for uh, everything that I've been through with moving. So it takes a while to get set up again. So anyways, today I wanted to share a little bit about the large bead frame with you. It's not going to be quite a deep dive because I don't have quite a setup yet to do a really good presentation on it. So I just want to do the introduction, show you a little bit of a presentation, a little bit of an introduction, see how my lighting is, see how everything's going over, maybe hopefully get some responses or comments from people to see if they're able to see the details. If not, I'll keep adjusting, keep working on it until we can get it situated just right. So let's go into the large bead frame. Let me show you what that looks like. All right, so here we are. We have the large bead frame on the right hand side, and you can see it's this frame with all these beads. There's 10 beads on each wire. There's at the very top a section on the left which is white, and that is to show the simple family. So we've got units, tens, and hundreds. So 10 units, 10 tens, 10 hundreds, and then you go into the gray area, which is the family of the thousands. So 1,000, 10,000s, 100,000s. And at the bottom on the left, you'll see this little black box, and that is to show the family of the millions. So typically the large bead frame is usually one of the last lessons we give, especially for math, in the primary classroom. And actually, it's very common for teachers to never even get to the large bead frame. You may have several years where you don't get to the large bead frame just because you don't have a student that's quite ready for it. And that's because it is a very abstract material. And typically the large bead frame, we use it a lot for multiplication, but we can use it for addition and subtraction. So let me give you a little bit of an outline first about what the child needs to know. So before we get to the large bead frame, the child has gone through a lot of different math materials. The child has mastered numbers 1 through 10. The child has been introduced to the decimal system, which is that means he or she understands units, tens, hundreds, thousands. They understand quantity and symbol. So I could ask them to tell me the quantity of things that they have, or in this case, usually in the classroom, it's golden beads. So they could do that through the 9,000s. But they can also give me the symbol as well. So if I ask them to bring me 2,347, the child would be able to bring me that in number cards. But they could also bring me that in quantity as well. So the child has already mastered that, the decimal system. And then the child has also mastered the understanding of operations. And that's both static and dynamic operations for addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. So they typically start that with the bank game. If they've been through the 3-year program in the primary environment, they will have gone through that with the bank game. And the bank game does operations up to 9,000. And really what the bank game is for, it's for understanding, getting a really concrete understanding of operations, as well as giving a definition for each operation and giving experience, physical, concrete experience of what addition is, what subtraction is, what multiplication is, and what division is. And I'll show you a little bit later on a chart that I have the ages for each one of these groups. So this is typically the bank game around 4.5. This is going to be for the 3-year cycle. This would be typically a second-year child. Around 4.5 is getting into that decimal system and getting into starting those operations. If that seems a little young, I can understand why people would think that's kind of young, but in the Montessori environment, we make everything so concrete that it's really not as difficult as you would think. They pick up on those things pretty quickly when you're giving them concrete examples of each thing. And then there's the stamp game, and then the stamp game is going to cover the same concepts as the bank game, but the stamp game is going to be slightly more abstract. So they can do operations up to 10,000, both static and dynamic, and with division, you can do short and long division with the stamp game. So what's different about the stamp game, aside from it being a little more abstract, is that the child is understanding the language and the symbols for all the parts of the operations. For example, in subtraction, we would start out with helping the child remember what is subtraction, what's the definition of subtraction, because we covered that with the bank game. So the child understands the concept of subtraction. They might need a reminder, but essentially it's when we take a larger number and then we take away a smaller number from that larger number to get an even smaller number, right? So we give that definition, we give them experience with that before they get to the stamp game. And then when we get to the stamp game, we go through the parts of the operation. For example, subtraction, we'd say the large number that we start with, that's our minuend. And then what we take away, that smaller number, that's the subtrahend. And what's left over, that's the difference. So that's when we start giving the language for that, and we start showing the symbols. And we also introduce them to like the equal bar, so, or the equal sign, depending on which one you're using. And then we get into linear counting, and we really solidify the understanding of quantity and symbol for teens and tens, and we do that through the teens and tens board. And we get into bead chains, and we're really in this area understanding quantity and symbol, plus counting linear in a linear fashion, but also counting in a way that helps the child internalize squaring and cubing. And those chains go up to 1,000 because we have the 1 chain, 2 chain, 3 chain, all the way up to the 10 chain. And the 10 chain squared is the 100 chain, and the 10 chain cubed is the 1,000 chain. So all of this kind of works together in a few different ways. One for linear counting and two for squaring and cubing. So then we get on to the next group, which is the exploration and memorization of math facts. And the child is going to work with this before they get to the large bead frame. And the reason why we really want them to have that passion for memorizing math facts before they get to the large bead frame is because we're asking them to do a lot of things in their head, to hold a lot of information in their head. So that abstract thought that they're going to need to do the more abstract work is really going to be solidified during the exploration and memorization of math facts. And just an example of the works that they're going to cover in this area. And again, this is going to be around 5 years old. They're going to be doing addition and subtraction on the strip boards. They're going to be doing multiplication and division boards. They're going to do what's called the snake game, both addition and subtraction. There's also a variation to show multiplication of that. Not so much division, though. We don't do division with the snake game. At least not that I'm aware of. If anybody knows one out there, that would be interesting. I'm not sure how that would work. But we have the bead bar layout for multiplication, and then we have finger charts. And the finger charts, I'll show you a little bit of what they look like, but I've covered it in previous videos, but I'll show you a little example of that. And then once we get through that memorization of math facts, now do they have to be perfect at it? No, but they really should have a good concept of a lot of the basic math facts. They really should be very interested in telling you 5 plus 5 is 10, 2 plus 5 is 7, or 8 minus 2 is 6. You know, if you have the child that's really going through those math facts and really, and you'll know when they hit that phase, it's going to be all about telling you all the different things that the numbers can do. So when you see the child really experiencing those math facts and understanding them, and you know that they have that solid idea of what the decimal system is all about, what the unit, tens, hundreds, and thousands are all about, then you know they're getting ready for this passage to abstraction. That's what we call it in my album. And these materials are really leading the child into abstract thinking. And before we get to the large bead frame, there's the small bead frame, and I'll get a little bit more into that in just a moment. And of course, we have to introduce the child to the hierarchy of numbers, because so far the child has been working into the thousands. And when they go to the larger bead frame, we're going to introduce them to working into the millions. So we need to introduce that concept, because in Montessori, we do isolation of difficulty. So when we take the child to the next step, we're not taking a big jump. We're not taking leaps. We're taking one small step. And so we try to isolate the difficulty to showing one new thing, one different thing. And when we show that one different thing, we always start out with relating it to what they know. What is familiar? What do they understand about this concept before I introduce something new? So just to show you here, I just want to give you a visual of what I just talked about. So introduction to the decimal system. As you see here, these are the golden bead systems. And we always introduce quantity before symbol, that just means the child is understanding the connection of the one-to-one correspondence and understanding how to count, right? Understanding the value of counting. And so on the left, we have our unit beads followed by our 10 bars. And those 10 bars, when you join them together, they make a 100 square. And then 10 100 squares makes the cube. And so when we introduce that, we always introduce the golden beads first. And I will play a game with them, like the bring me game. Can you bring me 100? And they'll hopefully bring me the 100 square, and I'll say, what did you bring me? And they'll say the 100 square, and they'll say, bring me 1,000. And hopefully the child brings me 1,000. If they don't, we don't correct them. We just maybe reintroduce them or play a few more games in association. It's that 3-period lesson. If you don't know what the 3-period lesson is, I have a whole video on that as well. So it'd be good to go back and look at that. So we do a 3-period lesson to introduce what is a unit, what is a 10, what is 100, what is 1,000. And then once they have that solidified, we're going to introduce the symbols. What is the symbol for a unit? What is the symbol for 10? What is the symbol for 100? What is the symbol for 1,000? How many zeros are in 10? How many zeros are in 100? How many zeros are in 1,000? And so then we associate them together, and then after that, that's when we start using these golden beads to do all the operations, starting with addition. And I'm not going to get into that in this video. That would make it way too long, but if you're interested in that, just leave a comment below, and I will get to that. Then once the child has experienced all the operations through the golden beads, and you can really tell when a child is ready for the golden beads, because in this 3 to 6 age group, what you're going to see when they are in the zone for learning something is repetition, repetition, repetition. That's not going to be so much the case for the older children. They're going to be on to new and novel. When you get into that 6 to 12 age group, it's going to be about the new and novel. But the 3 to 6 age group, if they're really in that first plane of development still, you're going to know you hit the right lesson because they're going to go back to it and they're going to kind of obsess over it. They're going to do it over and over again, and they're going to really, it's going to energize them. If you introduce one of these works too soon or too late, it's going to drain them of energy, and you're going to see it. So if you are trying these different things and something's not clicking, take a look at if you've introduced it too late or too soon. And if you think that the child is beyond a certain step, always introduce it with the easy material, the material that might not be interesting to them, and then kind of quickly go to the next step. If they've picked up on the next step quickly, that's where if they go back and repeat it and they're engaged by it and they're excited about it and they're asking you, hey, can you write me an operation for addition so I can do the stamp game? If you see them going back to it, that's a pretty good sign that they're finding the right place. So if you're wondering how I understand if a child is ready for the next one is they take care of the materials and they're doing the work correctly, right? That's the first step. I'll know that they're ready to move on when they stop repeating, when they're losing interest in it. And it's really hard to go back and get kids to do the golden bead system if they've already developed that, they're already developing that abstract mind, because that abstract mind between the ages of 4 and 7, it goes quickly. It starts going real quick. And so if you miss that window of opportunity for the golden beads, it's really hard to get your third years to go back and be interested in golden beads. They want to be in the stamp game. They want to be in the finger charts. They want to start moving towards those abstract materials. And so if you're noticing that the child likes math, or they have the potential for math, but they're just not engaged with the golden beads, maybe you missed that window of opportunity for the golden beads. And in that case, introduce that. They can be your helper when you introduce it to younger children, and then quickly move them on to the next step if it looks like they're getting bored with it. But the stamp game's a little more abstract, and so you'll see that this is an example actually of division, because they have the Skittles out right here. So but we have our units, our tens, our hundreds, and thousands. But this time we don't have 2 golden bead units, right? We don't have two 10 bars. We don't have 3 100 squares. We have stamps, and they all look the same except for different colors and different numbers on them. So we're not concretely going through each unit, each symbol is associated to particular number of units, tens, hundreds, and thousands. So this is typically, you're going to get around 5 to 5.5 for the stamp game as the age group, something in that area. I don't want you to be too obsessed with age because each child is different, but approximately that's what you're looking at there. And then we're going to get into linear counting. They do not spend a ton of time on the teens and the tens board. And the teens board is on the left, and they look similar, so it can be a little confusing if you're not familiar with working with them. And really what we're doing with the teens boards and the tens boards is we're really solidifying the quantity and symbol with the quantity and the symbol together for the numbers up to 99 with the teens and tens boards. And it doesn't show it in this picture, but actually, like everything else, we do quantity before symbols. So what we would show them is we'd show them, and I don't have an example on here, I didn't put the picture in. We would show them it's not the same as the golden beads, because when you get into teens and tens boards, we're using the colored bead system, which you can see an example of in the bead chains on the right. So we're getting into, we'd show them how to count those beads first. We'd show them what a 10 bar looks like, and then it would be 10 and 1 is 11. A 10 and a 2 would be 12, and the 2 is 2. You can see on the right-hand side in the bead chains, the 2 chain is green. So, and then the 3 chain is pink, and so just one individual 3 without counting it multiple times it would just be 3 pink beads together on a chain. And so we'd put that with a 10 bar, and then that would be 13. So we would show all of this with the colored bead system. The golden bead system would come together to show how to count for teens and tens, and then we'd show them the symbols, how to make the symbols. Once I see that I can make any number, any quantity out of the beads, and they can represent it with the symbol, then I'll know that they are getting ready to move on to more complicated work. And then with the bead chains, we start out actually showing them how to do the 100 chain. Then they move on to the 1,000 chain. Then we show how to skip count with the 5 chain. And they should be able to put out all the numbered tickets for counting with those. And I don't have bead chains to show you this lesson. Maybe someday I will. But now that I don't have a classroom, I don't have access to bead chains. So that's probably one, even if I had access to it, it'd be really difficult to record. I'm not really set up for making those videos because it'd be a little bit complicated, but maybe someday, maybe it's something to work towards. And here is an example of those exploration and memorization of math facts materials. So we have our addition strip board, our subtraction strip board, we have our multiplication board, and our division board. So this really gives the child a little more abstract idea of how to do all these operations. And then with it, we have some concrete materials, a little more concrete materials for them to work with and explore. And I love the snake game. This is the left-hand side down at the bottom with, there's a green box, a black box, a gray box, and then the gold box. These are materials for addition and subtraction snake game. And I really like it because it really helps the child break down what combinations make 10, right? So that they add them together, and then once we work on adding the snake, and when you add the snake, it goes from a colored snake into a golden snake. So this rainbow snake, and then you turn it into this golden snake. That's a lesson I'd like to do at some point. I'd like to record. And then when you do subtraction, you introduce these gray beads, which are what represent what you're supposed to take away. That's the subtrahend. And your colored snake goes into a golden snake, and then it goes into a disappearing snake. So I like the snake game. It's not for everybody, but I think it's kind of fun. And then we have this box, this decanomial bead box right here of colored beads, and that is to show multiplication. So that gets into our multipliers. So like if we take out 4 sevens, that's 7 4 times, right? And then we can count it out. We can put that out, and we can map that out with beads, and we can show it in different ways. So that I think it's fun. I think all the math stuff is fun for the most part. I don't know if all my students would agree, but I like it. And then these right here in the middle, these charts in the middle, these are an example of the addition charts, and these are the finger charts, and that's just they're taking their fingers and they're sliding them together to find equations. And then you have your control chart 1, control chart 2 are on. You have the different control charts so the child can check their work. And that's true for addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. They all have finger charts and they all have control charts to check their work so that the child doesn't have to come to you. They can go through and see if they did it correctly. And all of that leads us to passage to abstraction. That is second to last group in the AMI math album. The last group is fractions, and that's a whole different subject that I love, but we're gonna put that off right now. And you can see on the left-hand side, this is an example of the small bead frame. And the small bead frame, as you can see, has the units, tens, hundreds, and thousands. And if you're wondering, why do you have a small bead frame and a large bead frame? Can't you just do the same thing on each? Well, yeah, technically, but remember Montessori does isolation of difficulty. And so the child is learning one new thing right here, right? The child is learning how to use the bead frame. The child already understands how to do operations into the thousands because they've done it with previous materials. So that's the familiar part. Now we have to give the child an experience on the small bead frame. And we do this, and we typically do this with addition and subtraction. The multiplication is really more for the large bead frame. So we're going to start getting them familiar with addition and subtraction on the small bead frame. And then once they start working on that, on the right-hand side, this is called the wooden hierarchy of numbers. And this is where we're going to get into showing the child what 1 million looks like. And so we can show a unit. Here's a little 10, a little 100, a 1,000 cube. And then, of course, we have our 10,000s, our 100,000s, and then 1 million. And then we challenge the child to think even bigger. What would it look like to have 1 billion? What size cube would we have to have for that? And so we really start to challenge the child that this idea of counting is really infinite, right? And that just how big a number you can get, and they get really excited about that. So this is everything the child would really need to know to get through the I wonder if you can hear my clock in the background. I still have my Christmas clock up, so I'm not sure if you could hear that. Anyways, so this is everything the child needs to know before they get to the large bead frame. And that may seem like a lot, but in the Montessori classroom, that is usually about 5.5 years old. We can really start working on this. And of course, every child is different, right? Not every child is going to get to this by the end of primary, but we're ready. If they're ready, the teacher is ready, the guide is ready. And just to give you a little bit of a map, let me show you. Now this is something my trainer, Dr. Dubovoy, she didn't really love this layout. I think a student had made it. I find it very helpful, and you never want to be dogmatic about anything and really focus on this is where the child has to be at 3 years old. This is where the child has to be at 3.5. But it's a good general map just to kind of get you familiar with the Montessori classroom and all the materials. So we do a 3-year cycle in Montessori, and in the primary age group, we can get some kids coming in as young as about 2.5. And then they stay in our classroom until about 6 years old. And this is every lesson in my album that I had to have to graduate with my training. Now, of course, always have to add more, or you have to add half steps for lessons if you have like special needs students. So you always collect more. In practical life, you have an unending amount of lessons to add to your albums. But this is generally your entire album right here. And if you take a look, the blue is the math. Oops, I accidentally rotated that in the wrong direction. Let's try this again. I meant to enlarge. So let's take a look. We have age 4. I might enlarge it one more time. So at age 4, you're going to see between 3.5 and 4. That's where the child is really starting in the math area. And that's the number rods, sandpaper, numerals. Again, quantity before symbols. So we're going to start the number rods first and then introduce the symbols through the sandpaper numbers. And you can also start fractions, and you should start fractions fairly early on, but these are sensorial explorations. We're not really going to get into the fractions as a formal math concept until around 5.5, 6 years old. So the fractions are very sensorial at this age. So let's scroll over. See, these are all the math materials that we have in our albums. And if you're looking for large bead frame, it is here's 6 years old. Follow it down, and the large bead frame is right there. So some of the last things they'll do is short division with racks and tubes. I love racks and tubes. Hierarchy of numbers, large bead frame, and of course right here at the bottom are operations with fractions. So we come back to fractions. We start out with fractions early on with that exploration. An exploration, sensorial exploration of equivalencies comes around 4.5. Then you give the nomenclature for fractions, and then you start working on fractions with operations. And so that is really, you're going to see, let's scroll down just a little bit. At 6 years old in the primary classroom, that's their new lessons are entirely really math, are the more advanced ones. They have some language lessons yet, but they should be getting to the point where they've been introduced to all the grammar concepts for the primary album, which is conjunction, preposition, adverb, logical adjective, game, all that stuff. Interpretive reading and simple sentences, all that stuff. So that third year, let's say they're about 5 years old, it's going to be a lot of language and a lot of math. At least it should be, ideally, right? COVID kind of screwed everything up for a lot of people. So that's our lesson sequence right there. And I can go back into this if you're interested in we can do a deeper dive into this chart, but I don't want people to be obsessed with that chart because it doesn't always. Children are different. Each child is different, and sometimes you got to move things around to make it work. So the next thing I want to show you is how much does it cost to get a large bead frame? Because it doesn't do any good for me to show you all about this lesson and tell you all about the large bead frame if you don't have access to it, right? So let's take a little look at that. And here is our large bead frame at the Neen House website. And Neen House in Montessori, it's probably your best, or how should I say, most elite material supplier. And this is ideally where AMI schools try to get their materials from. However, when I was going through training, my trainers had a little bit of a beef with Neen House because Neen House seems to be getting more expensive and their quality of material seems to be going down. So something's happened over the last little while to change, I guess, the quality of their work. And now I'm not speaking from personal experience because I haven't been in Montessori long enough to see that transition. I started in Montessori around, I think 2013 is when I started in Montessori. So my trainers said, it is the ideal place. It is it is where you typically would go for the quality materials in Montessori. But they hadn't been too happy with Neen House. Now I'll say, if you buy it from somewhere else, the materials are probably going to be even a little cheaper than what Neen House makes. And so if you're going to invest in materials that last a really long time, Neen House is probably still the place to get them if they're going to be heavily used materials. Now, if you are homeschooling, if you're tutoring, like I'm transitioning into more of a tutoring homeschool support type situation, so my focus is going to be buying materials that aren't used quite as heavily as a 30-child classroom. So I'm going to choose probably to do some cheaper materials. But as you can see here, the large bead frame from Neen House is about $72. And then if you want to get the large bead frame paper from Neen House, a pack of 50, it's $41. It's a little pricey, right? Is it worth it? It depends on the level of use you're going to put through it, right? So if you're very careful with materials and it's not going to get used heavily, this might be a little bit pricier than what you want. So let's look at Montessori Outlet. There are other places like Alice in Montessori. I'm choosing to look at Montessori Outlet right now, simply because it's I've ordered through Montessori Outlet. That's where I got my trinomial cube from, and I've liked my trinomial cube. I haven't had any issues with it, and so I can verify that I have bought materials through them. Just one, but I think one of my coworkers bought some dressing frames through Montessori Outlet, and I think they broke the first week in her classroom. So different people might have different experiences, right? But as you can see here, the large bead frame from Montessori Outlet is $20. That's a huge difference, right? I cannot guarantee that the quality is going to be the same as Nienhuis, and Nienhuis may still be the better quality material. I have not compared the two, but I know that Nienhuis is known for better quality materials. However, just remember that might not always be the case. And then if you want to buy a 50 pack of large bead frame sheets, it's about $13. Now, I did want to show you one more thing before we get to the actual, what I want to get to show you next is Montessori Print Shop, which, you know, if you listen to my other videos, I love Montessori Print Shop. You cannot make a paper large bead frame, unfortunately. So the only thing you can get on here is bead frame paper. Now, you buy the digital download for $1.25. You can make as many copies as you want. I don't have this download, so I haven't experienced writing with it yet. But you can also make it with notebook paper, right? You get your lines on your notebook paper, and then you get a green colored pencil, a blue colored pencil, red colored pencil, and then you can just draw lines on a sheet of paper. So you can always make it yourself if you don't want to buy anything, and that's perfectly acceptable. So that being said, I want to show you what I did when I needed a large bead frame and I didn't have money. It was during COVID, and I, you know, like everybody else, I didn't have the money, and I didn't have access to the materials I needed. So I made a lot of my materials, and I made a large bead frame. And here is my large bead frame. It's not actually a large bead frame. It's actually a large paper clip frame. And so what I did is I looked for everything I had around the house. I had some scrap wood, I had some dowels, and I had paper clips that matched the colors of the beads. And so it is a very, very humble large bead frame, and I might try to remake it someday. But I'm also leaning towards ordering through Montessori Outlet, getting that $20 one, and we'll see. But I just want to show you a little bit of how it works. It's kind of an awkward setup, so trying to reach it is a little difficult and still being able to show it. So let me see if I can adjust it enough. So I realize the color might not be coming through, but right here I have 10 green paper clips, 10 blue paper clips, 10 red paper clips, and then green, blue, red, green. However, if you're like me and you're just trying to use stuff from around your house, you run out of the proper things. So in the blue here, I actually have one purple. You probably can't see it, so that works to my favor. And then in here, I ran out of red, so I had a pink one. So it's not perfect, right? But I needed something to use. I needed something to work with. And like many people during COVID, you just did the best you could with what you had. Now I realize there's probably a lot more talented people out there that could easily make this, and they've got the beads. Lots of more crafty people out there than I am, with a lot more skills, and I'm sure that you would make a beautiful large bead frame all on your own. So that's always a possibility. Just think outside the box. If you're looking for something for yourself or your child and you have a little bit of skill in making things, go for it. So you got some wood, some dowels, some paper clips, some beads, whatever you want to use. Although I really love the beads because the beads slide back and forth. The paper clips, they don't slide quite so well. They have a lot of friction. Not quite as fun as the beads that go back and forth. But I don't want to get into, I know this video is already getting really long, so I'm not going to get into a very long presentation on this today. I think I'm going to wait and do a separate one maybe after I order my large bead frame from Montessori Outlet, so you can kind of see what a store-bought version of it really looks like. But again, like I said before, with Montessori in the math section, we always do quantity before symbol. So what would be the first thing we do? Well, we'd go through, first of all, we'd connect the child with what's familiar. And we'd want to make sure they are familiar. They're going to be familiar with this because we already introduced the small bead frame, right? So now we have to show them the 10,000, 100,000, and the millions. And when we're going through it, we're going to do the same thing as before, where we're going to count 1, 2. This would be a lot easier if I had beads instead of paperclip. 2, 3. And you're going to keep counting until you get to 10, and then you slide them all back, and then you go to the next one, and then you would count 10, 20, if I can get it. I'm using a craft stick, so it's not the most elegant thing in the world. 20, 30, and again, you'd go through until you get to 100. Then you count your 100 all the way up to 910. 900, and then you would go to 1,000, and so you'd have the child count all the way through. And I know I'm rushing through this presentation, and at some point I'll go back and I'll do a nice slow presentation, but I think I want to wait until I get an actual large bead frame. So once the child can count through that, you're going to ask them to make numbers, like make 1,000. So let's find units, tens, hundreds. 1,000. All right. 1,200. 1, 2, 200, 30, 10, 20, 30, 34. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. So you would say a number and have the child make it. I think it went off the screen a little bit. There we go. So 1,234. So it'd have 1 of the thousands, 2 of the hundreds, 3 of the tens, and 4 units, right? So once you can say a number and the child can build a number out of the beads, then you can move on to the symbolization portion. So usually if I had a regular one, I'd just tip this over and they'd all just slide over really fun. They can make a clickety-clack sound. It would be lovely. It's very satisfying. Then you'd move over to your large bead frame paper, which I have some right here. So you would show them how to write on the paper. And unfortunately, I can show you the paper or I can show you the frame, but I'm going to have to tip my camera back and forth to do it. So I don't know if that's my best option for the moment. But for instance, if we're making 1, say 1, and then I'm going to write 1 on my large bead frame paper. And so I don't know if you can see this. I wrote the number 1 right there. So let's do 2. And you want to orient them to the paper beforehand. You want to show them here's a simple family for units, tens, hundreds, and then the thousands, and then the millions. So now I've made 2, so I'm going to write the number 2. And there's my number 2. And you're going to write it right on the line. I know that may seem a little confusing to write it on the line on the middle. But that is the correct way to write on it. And so anyways, once you get through all the units, you have to move through tens. And then I'll show you what it looks like. All right, so we've got 110, right? We've gotten to 10 now. And so we're going to go to our blue line right here. We're going to write, let's say I finished 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, right? And I'm moving to tens. And on our blue line here, we're going to write 1. Notice I haven't put the 0 down yet to make it say 10. So we're just going to say 110 for right now. Then we're going to go 2 tens, right? 2 tens. There's our 2 tens. Let's do 3 tens, right? 3. And so we're going to get all the way through until we get to 9 tens, and then we're going to show how to make 100. We're going to start all over again. Let's say we finished all of our tens. All right, let's go to 100, right? But there's our red line. So I'm going to write 1. And this is gonna take the child a long time, right? They got to go through the millions. They got to go through each million, there's 10 on each one, so they're going to go up to 10 million. So this is going to take the child a long time to write. So they're going to go through the hundreds, and they're going to write 100, 200, 300, 400. And notice I'm still not filling in the zeros, which is really important, right? We got to fill in the zeros. But we're going to wait. We're going to get all the way through, and we're going to get down to, I'm going to skip all the way down to, let's say we get to 1 million, right? Or let's just say for fun 9 million, because that's where we're at. So I go to the millions, and I've made 9, right? Let's actually make 9. I don't know if you can see it on the camera. I'll try to tilt it down so we can do it. We see it just a little better. So we're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And you're going to see that one lonely little paper clip left, 9. So we've made 9 million, and we've written the number 9 on the millions, on that millions line. So let's say that the child is finishing up writing all these down. They've moved all the beads. They've written all the numbers. Now we show them to go back and make those zeros. So let's go back and make those zeros now, right? Let's fill in, how many zeros did tens have? Well, they just have 1 0, right? Here's my tens. I filled in the zeros. And now let's fill in hundreds. And there's my hundreds. Let's say we've done the whole paper. It gets all the way to the bottom. It's a really long paper. And we're now at 9 million. We've made 9 million. And now we're going to fill in the zeros. How many zeros does 9 million have? Well, it has 6 zeros. 6 zeros. There we go. 9 million. And so then we can start doing addition and subtraction, and reminding the child, just like the small bead frame, how to do addition and subtraction. I can do that on this frame, but I don't think I'm going to do that on this video. But if you really, really want that lesson before I order a large bead frame from, I think, Montessori Outlet, I think that's where I'm going to get mine from. If you really want it on my very humble bead frame, my large paper clip frame, just let me know and I'll make that video. But for right now, I think for this video, I think I'm going to wait on doing anything further, just because I think this is a little hard to see, and it's a little big, and I think waiting might be a better option, so you can have a more clear presentation. So that's how you introduce the large bead frame. You start counting the quantity, and then you start making the numbers, showing the symbol, and practice writing that symbol. You're going to write down. You can write down a number like 2,342,135. Let's say that. You can write that number down. They can build it. They can practice building it. Just doing that before you get to operations is going to take a while. Just have them be comfortable building numbers and writing numbers on the paper. So don't rush through it, because this can get very confusing. If you're seeing that the child is getting confused, take it back a step, right? And this is going to require, when we get to addition and subtraction, it's going to require the child to really make sure they know those math facts, because they're going to have to hold the numbers in their head while they try and do some of the operations. Like, for instance, if I have 3 units and I need to add, let's say I have to add 10. All right. So I have 3. Let's add 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I don't know if I can get that with a 7. And then say, we're out. 7. So we got to hold in our head, right? 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, 7. Let's exchange 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, so how many units do we have? We have 3 units. So our answer, we write down on the unit line, we'd write down the number 3. And how many tens do we have? We have 1. We have that. So, and that's how we would do that. So they have to kind of hold those numbers in their head, but when they start getting into that memorization, when they start getting into that memorization, they'll kind of know already. They might know like, oh, well, 10 plus 3 is 13, right? And and when they get really into the memorization, they tend to not use the bead frame. And that's when we make the operations a little more complicated. So I'm like, oh, well, you can do it in your head. But if I see that the answer is incorrect, I want you to go back and check your work with the large bead frame and maybe see where you made a mistake, right? And that's when you can start challenging the child, like, okay, I understand you did this all in your head. And if you look at it and be like, but the answer is something different, why don't you go back and use that large bead frame and see if you made a mistake somewhere in what you did in your head. So that's some of as they get into the elementary ages, that's some of the ways you can kind of encourage them to still use that large bead frame when they need to go back and check their work and they really would rather just do everything in their head. And then we usually use this large bead frame for multiplication. And I'm not going to go through it now, but this is an example of, here's a multiplier of a 1-digit multiplier of 3. And so as you can see, we take the multiplicand and we break it down. So 2 units, 4 tens, 900, 7,000, 80,000, 400,000. So, and then we put our multiplier on the side and we say, well, how many times are we going to build? What's multiplication when we take the same number and build it multiple times, right? Many times. We repeat it. So how many times are we going to build the number 2? We're going to build it 3 times. Well, and then the answer is going to be 6. How many times do we build the number 4? We're going to build it 3 times. What's the answer to that? Oh, well, we've got to do some exchanging on that one, right? So that's where it gets a little tricky. So anyways, we break it down and then we build those number multiple times. And so just to give one last little example of what it looks like to do multiplication, and I know I'm really rushing through this. This isn't a full presentation. It's just a little introduction into what this looks like. Let's say over here we have 538,927, and here's where we get into the 2-digit multipliers. So I have it times 23. Well, with the large bead frame, we can only have a 1-digit multiplier. We can only have a unit multiplier. So we've got to break this down. So we're going to break it down like we did before, right? So we'll build the 7 unit here, the 2 tens here, and so on. We're going to build it just like we did that before, right? We're going to break it down, and we're going to say, how many times do we have to build this number? We have to build it 3 times. So build 7 3 times, 2, 9, 8, 3, and 5, right? We're going to build those multiple times because that's what multiplication is. However, we're not done yet, right? We got to do something with our 10. How many zeros are there in 10? Well, there's 1 0. All right, well, let's take our 0 out of our multiplier here and make it a unit. So that means we have to add zeros to our multiplicand. So instead of a 7 unit, this becomes 70. So we have to change the 7 to a 70 and the 2 tens to 200 because we're adding a 0, right? We took the 10 out of the 20 and we've turned it into a 2, a unit. So we're just doing the same number, but we're adding a 0. So this is where we're going to have to do a little addition, right? We get to the end. We found out what our answer is. We're going to take our product from our first problem, our first operation here, times 3, and our product from our second operation here, times 2. We're going to add them together. And so we're going to get the sum, which is then the product of the original. So you're doing some complicated stuff, right? You're breaking down, you're understanding the decimal system for each big number, the multiplicand, and you're also understanding what does a multiplier do. And they're also understanding, if you take the 0, if you take that 0 out of the multiplier and put it into the multiplicand, then you can do your bring this into a 1-digit multiplier, and then you can add the 2 numbers together. And I realized that was probably the worst explanation ever. It's a lot easier just to see it. And so we're building it all with the beads at the same time. And that's why when a child really starts to do the work in their head and doesn't want to use the large bead frame, it's like, well, I got a more complicated lesson for you. I have it, or as I like to say to my students, don't worry, I have a challenge for you. And they always know I have a challenge for them. I'm like, don't you worry, I've got a challenge. I always have a challenge. So we don't want them to get too bored, right? So anyways, that's a little introduction to the large bead frame. Let me know what made sense, what didn't make sense. Let me know if you want a better breakdown of the large bead frame of the lesson. Like I said, I can do it with my humble little paper clip frame that I made during COVID, or I can wait till I get a nice, a better quality one, an actual bead frame, not a paper clip frame. And I can show you the full lesson from beginning to finish and maybe break down addition, subtraction, and multiplication. Particularly multiplication, it gets complicated, right? So maybe addition and subtraction in one lesson, and we don't do a ton of subtraction with the large bead frame, but the bigger thing is getting to that multiplication, right? How to break that multiplication down. And so just let me know what your thoughts are, what your experience are. Have you made a large bead frame? Have you made any Montessori materials at your home? Are you trying to find Montessori materials that are affordable because you're a homeschooler or you're trying to start a classroom? Just let me know what kind of creative things you're doing. And let me know what you would like to see more of, or what made sense, what didn't make sense. All that good stuff. As far as going forward, for future videos, I'm still trying to get together with some of my friends. Coordinating time is always a little tricky, right? So I'm starting to coordinate some times with my friends. I really want to go over that 3-year cycle, because I really think when you start talking about that 3-year cycle, it covers a lot of ground. It covers a lot of materials. It covers a lot of theory. And I think a discussion between a couple of different Montessori people would be very helpful for parents for understanding the holistic picture. The other thing I want to work on, besides doing the large bead frame, is starting some simple baking curriculum. There's some things that I've picked up along the way. It's not official lessons in my album, but it's things that I've seen other people do that I have worked, that I know have worked really well, especially for like the 3-year-olds, and then showing that evolution of how to take baking from very simple isolation of difficulty, breaking it down from those very small steps and putting it together into this big independent baking curriculum that allows the child to really just go ahead and make like a simple yeast bread all by themselves, except for putting it in the oven. That's where I still help them out. Putting it in the oven, taking it out. That's my part. The rest is up to the child. If you're interested in that, please let me know below. So I've got a lot of great ideas, and hopefully now I have a little more time now that I moved. So just give me some feedback below, and I will see you in the next video. But don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. So I will see you in the next video.